Rachel saw my Rolls-Royce Cullinan and demanded a share of the fortune she had mocked me for trying to build. The next morning, she served me with legal papers. What she did not know was that I had preserved every date, every purchase, and every dollar. I saw her standing near the entrance to a charity dinner in downtown Franklin. She was standing beside Brandon Hayes when I stepped out of my dark blue Rolls-Royce Cullinan. For 1 second, Rachel looked as though she had forgotten how to breathe. Her eyes moved from the vehicle to my suit, then back to the silver hood ornament. Brandon did not look surprised. He looked interested. Rachel crossed the pavement before the valet could close my door. "Whose car is this?" "Mine." Her expression changed. The shock narrowed into calculation. "You bought this after our divorce?" "Yes." She glanced toward Brandon. He gave her a small nod, almost too slight to notice. Rachel smiled then, but there was no warmth in it. "We need to talk. We have nothing left to divide. That depends on where the money came from." By 9 the next morning, she was standing on my porch with a legal envelope and the same confident smile. She stood on my porch as though she had returned to collect something I had kept for her. "I want my share, Jack." I opened the envelope after she left. The demand reached far beyond the Cullinan. Rachel was not automatically entitled to half of my company. To get anything, she had to prove that I had hidden a valuable asset during our marriage and developed it after the divorce. She wanted access to the business, its contracts, and the income that had paid for the vehicle. For years earlier, she had watched me leave our marriage with an old pickup, a worn leather briefcase, and a house that needed more repairs than either of us wanted to count. She believed she had won. Maybe, at the time, I believed it too. We had been married for 26 years. We raised a family, paid bills, and survived lean seasons together. That history made the ending harder to accept. I worked for the county transportation department outside Franklin, Tennessee, keeping medical shuttle vehicles safe and reliable. The work was practical: inspection sheets, oil stains, service schedules, and calls before sunrise. I trusted it because machines did not respond to charm. A worn brake line either got replaced in time or someone paid for it later. Rachel never understood why that kind of work mattered to me. When she started selling luxury homes, our lives began moving in different directions. She spent her days inside marble kitchens and gated neighborhoods. She learned which watches impressed wealthy clients, which restaurants signaled status, and which people were worth remembering. At first, I admired her confidence. Then, confidence became comparison. "You are still doing the same job," she told me one night. We were sitting at the kitchen table. I had just finished reviewing a maintenance report. "It is a good job," I said. "It is a safe job." She said the word safe like it meant small. Rachel wanted bigger commissions, better addresses, and new circles. I wanted our mortgage paid and our future protected. Over time, she began treating stability like failure. I rarely argued. Years of maintenance work had taught me that noise was not progress. When Rachel grew sharp, I grew quieter. I thought patience would protect the marriage. It did not. By the time the divorce papers arrived, she had already decided what my life would become without her. Ordinary, limited, forgettable. The settlement was painful, but clean. Rachel kept the newer home near the country club. I took the older property south of town, a narrow brick house with a leaking roof and a detached workshop behind it. She also kept most of the furniture. I kept my tools. During the final meeting, her attorney asked whether I had any business interests, patents, investments, or unfinished commercial projects. Rachel laughed softly. "Jack has a hobby in the garage," she said. "That is all." I looked at her, then at the document in front of me. The project she dismissed was not a company. It was barely an idea. For years, I had watched small medical transport fleets lose vehicles because maintenance records were scattered across paper folders, old spreadsheets, and the memories of overworked employees. A missed inspection could disable a van for days, sometimes longer. I had started sketching a simpler system. Nothing dramatic, just a way to track wear, schedule service, and warn managers before minor problems became expensive ones. Rachel had called it another excuse to spend time in the garage. She made one condition clear during the separation: no marital money goes into that project. I agreed. Then, I wrote the date beside her statement. That habit had followed me through 30 years of maintenance work. Every repair had a date. Every replacement had a record. Every decision left a trail. After the divorce became final, I waited. I bought no software, ordered no equipment, and accepted no money. I closed the old notebook, placed it inside a document box, and left it alone. Only after the court entered the final decree did I begin again. The first version was crude. I built it at a folding table beneath a buzzing fluorescent light. Some nights, rain tapped against the metal workshop roof while I entered service intervals by hand. I tested every alert twice. Then, 3 times. 6 months later, a small senior care center outside Franklin agreed to try the system on 5 vans. The director was a woman named Margaret Ellis. She was 68, direct, and suspicious of promises. "What happens when it fails?" she asked. "I find out why," I said. "Then I fix it." She studied me for a moment. "That is not a sales answer." "No, it is a maintenance answer." She gave me 90 days. By the end of the trial, the center had reduced emergency repairs and missed routes. Margaret introduced me to another facility. That facility introduced me to 2 more. I never announced any of it. Rachel had already taught me what happened when people valued the appearance of success more than the work beneath it. So, I kept working. I filed the invoices, dated each design change, and paid every expense from my post-divorce account. And every night, before turning off the workshop light, I locked the records inside a gray steel cabinet. For 3 years, the company grew quietly. Then, one regional hospital asked for a full proposal. That contract changed the scale of everything. But, the morning after Rachel demanded her share, my attorney did not ask how much the business was worth. Eleanor Price had represented me during the divorce. She knew the settlement, the dates, and the exact language Rachel had approved. Eleanor looked across her desk and asked one question. "Jack, how did Rachel learn the exact revenue figure?" I had no answer. Not yet. Then, I remembered the man who had visited my office 6 weeks earlier. Brandon Hayes had called himself a potential client. He had asked to see more than any real customer needed. Brandon Hayes had not come to my office looking for a fleet system. He had come looking for numbers. I remembered him clearly now. He arrived in a charcoal suit, driving a silver Bentley that looked polished enough to belong under showroom lights. He introduced himself as the owner of a consulting firm that advised luxury resorts and private transportation companies. His handshake was firm. His questions were better rehearsed than informed. At first, nothing felt unusual. Potential clients often wanted to understand the system before discussing price. Brandon asked how the maintenance alerts worked, how many vehicles we could support, and whether our service could scale across multiple locations. Then, his interest shifted. He stopped asking about safety. He started asking about revenue. "How many active accounts do you have?" he asked. "That depends on what you consider active." "Paying customers." I gave him the public figure listed in our presentation. He smiled. "And what does each account bring in annually?" "That varies by fleet size." He leaned back in the chair and studied me. "You are careful with numbers. I am careful with other people's information." That answer should have ended the subject. It did not. Brandon asked whether I owned the company outright. He wanted to know whether investors were involved, whether I had partners, and whether any former spouse retained an interest. The last question stood out now. At the time, I assumed he was evaluating risk. Business clients often asked about ownership before signing long contracts. Now, sitting across from Eleanor, it sounded different. "What exactly did he see?" she asked. I pictured the conference room, the monitor on the wall, the printed proposal near his right hand, the blue folder my assistant had carried in before the meeting. "He saw the standard presentation," I said. "Nothing confidential." "Are you certain?" I wanted to say yes. Instead, I slowed down. There had been a brief interruption during the meeting. My operations manager called me into the hallway because one of our clients had lost access to the service dashboard. I was gone for less than 4 minutes. Brandon had remained alone. When I returned, the presentation was still open on the screen. The blue folder was closed. His phone rested face down beside it. Nothing looked disturbed. That was the problem. Nothing had looked wrong. Eleanor tapped the demand letter with one finger. "The estimate Rachel submitted is not a guess," she said. "It is too close." "How close?" "Close enough that someone saw internal information." A cold pressure settled behind my ribs. Our public materials showed customer count and service coverage. They did not show contract values, renewal rates, or projected revenue. Rachel's filing included all 3. I drove back to the office and began with the access records. Our building was small. 7 employees worked there. Only 3 had permission to view financial reports. My operations manager, my accountant, and me. I spoke to each of them separately. No accusations, just dates and questions. My accountant had never met Rachel or Brandon. My operations manager remembered Brandon, but said he had not shared any files. The third person with access was me, and I knew exactly where my records had gone. That left the presentation. Every client proposal carried a tracking code. I added those codes after a competitor copied one of our early pricing models. Brandon's file had its own number. I entered it into the system. The activity log appeared almost immediately. The presentation had been opened once during our meeting. Then, again, 2 days later. Then, 5 more times over the next month. The final access occurred at 11:43 on the night Rachel saw me beside the Cullinan. I read the timestamp twice. The following morning, she appeared at my door demanding her share. There was more. The file had been opened from 2 separate devices. One belonged to Brandon's consulting office. The other did not. Eleanor joined me by video call while I reviewed the log. "Can you identify the second device?" she asked. "Not yet. Do not contact either of them." I was not planning to. She studied my face through the screen. "Jack, Rachel may believe she has a legitimate claim. She does not." That is not what I said. I looked again at the letter. Rachel's argument was carefully built. The filing looked complicated. Her argument was not. Rachel claimed my business had begun while we were married, and that I had hidden its value until after the divorce. It was a story designed to sound reasonable. A quiet husband, a garage project, a sudden fortune, a new Rolls-Royce. Put those pieces in the wrong order, and suspicion did the rest. Eleanor asked me to gather every document connected to the company's beginning, not just contracts and bank statements. She wanted notebooks, receipts, emails, equipment purchases, and the date of every design revision. "Rachel will argue that the asset existed before the divorce," she said. "It did not." "Then we prove it. We do not assume anyone will take your word." That part did not bother me. Records were easier than memories. Records did not change their story when money appeared. I spent the afternoon in my home workshop, reviewing files from the gray steel cabinet. The earliest paid invoice came 6 months after the divorce. The software license had been purchased 3 weeks after the final decree. The business account had been opened with money from my personal savings. Everything pointed in the same direction. Still, Rachel had one thing that troubled me. She knew the revenue estimate. And Brandon had one thing no genuine client needed. A question about my former wife. Near sunset, I found the tracking report for the second device. The location was not Rachel's home. It belonged to the office of her real estate brokerage. Then, I noticed another detail. The file had not merely been opened. Someone had downloaded it. The download changed the question. Until that moment, I had been asking whether Rachel possessed information she should not have known. Now, I had to ask what she planned to do with it. Eleanor told me to preserve the access log and make 3 copies. One stayed on our secured server. One went to her office. The last went into the gray steel cabinet in my home workshop. Then, she gave me another assignment. "Build the timeline," she said. "Every important date, from the divorce through the purchase of the vehicle." The Cullinan is not connected to the marriage. I know that. We need the records to say it before Rachel gets the chance to say otherwise. I started with the final divorce decree. It had been entered on April 18th, for years earlier. Our joint accounts were closed 11 days later. The remaining balances were divided exactly as the settlement required. The old notebook had existed during the marriage. Nothing else had. No software license. No customer agreement. No registered business. No working equipment. No income. The first purchase connected to the new system came 3 weeks after the decree. It was a basic software subscription paid from my personal checking account. The first functional test happened 2 months after that. Margaret Ellis signed the trial agreement in October. Her senior care center made the first payment the following January. I placed each document in order across the conference table. The paper trail stretched from one end to the other, quiet and exact. Then, I added the purchase records for the Cullinan. I had resisted buying it for nearly 6 months. My old pickup still ran well. It carried tools, survived winter roads, and never asked anyone to admire it. I understood that vehicle. It fit the man I had been for most of my life. The Cullinan belonged to a world Rachel understood better than I did. The suggestion came from Daniel Mercer, the administrator of a private senior living network. After one presentation, he walked me to the parking lot and stopped beside my truck. "You know your system," he said. "But some of these boards decide what they believe before you enter the room." I thought results mattered. They do. Image gets you enough time to explain them. I disliked the idea. Still, he was right about the rooms I had begun entering. The executives listened more carefully when success looked familiar to them. I purchased the Cullinan through the business after Eleanor and my accountant reviewed every detail. The funds came from retained earnings generated years after the divorce. No loan from the marriage. No hidden transfer. No shared account. Rachel had seen one expensive vehicle and built an entire history around it. Eleanor arrived late that afternoon and studied the timeline in silence. "This is strong," she said. "That does not sound like complete confidence." "It is not." She pointed to the old notebook. This existed before the divorce. It was a collection of maintenance problems. It also contains early ideas. None of them worked. That may not stop Rachel from claiming the value began there. I opened the notebook carefully. The cardboard cover was bent near the spine. Several pages carried grease marks from the county garage. Most entries were observations. Missed inspections. Duplicated service orders. Drivers reporting problems that never reached maintenance staff. Near the middle, I had drawn a rough diagram connecting vehicle records to automatic reminders. It was crude, incomplete, and technically useless. Then, I turned to the first page. Rachel's handwriting crossed the top in blue ink. "If you insist on wasting time on this garage hobby, no marital money goes into it." Below her sentence was my own note. "Project suspended until personal funds are legally separate." Both lines carried the same date. For a long moment, Eleanor said nothing. Then, she photographed the page. "This helps," she said. "Helps is not the same as settles." "No. It shows Rachel knew the project had no funding and no commercial value when you separated. It also shows you stopped." I looked down at her signature beneath the statement. Rachel had probably forgotten writing it. To her, it had been another small victory during a bitter season. To me, it had been an instruction. I followed it exactly. Eleanor closed the notebook. "We still need independent proof that nothing was developed during the marriage. The software company has account creation records. Get them. The equipment supplier has purchase dates. Get those too." I made the calls before she left. By the following morning, I had confirmation from both companies. Every paid tool, every active license, and every functional component had been acquired after the divorce. The evidence was becoming clearer. But Rachel was not waiting for clarity. At 10:17, an email arrived from one of my largest hospital partners. Their legal department had received notice that ownership of my company was under dispute. They were pausing contract negotiations until the matter was resolved. I read the message once. Then, again. Rachel had moved beyond demanding a share. She was reaching into the business itself. A second email arrived 3 minutes later. This one came from Brandon Hayes. He said he believed the dispute could be settled privately. All I had to do was agree to a confidential payment. Attached was a proposed amount. It was large enough to hurt my company, and precise enough to tell me they had seen far more than one presentation. Brandon's payment demand told me exactly what Rachel wanted. It was not fairness. It was leverage. The amount in his proposal was large enough to weaken my company, but small enough to sound cheaper than a public fight. He gave me 72 hours to accept. No greeting. No explanation. Just a deadline and a number. I forwarded the message to Eleanor. She called less than 5 minutes later. "Do not answer him." I was not planning to. "Good. Rachel has already contacted your hospital partner. If you respond emotionally, they will use it." I looked through the glass wall of my office. My employees were working as if nothing had changed. Phones rang. Keyboards clicked. A printer fed out service reports near the front desk. They did not know one contract had already been paused. They did not know someone outside the company was trying to turn uncertainty into pressure. I wanted to protect them from that. Silence, however, did not stop Rachel. By noon, another client called. The director spoke carefully. "Jack, I received a message from your former wife." "What did she say?" "She said there may be a dispute over who owns your company." "There is no ownership dispute." That is not how her letter reads. I closed my eyes for one breath. "What do you need from me?" "Documentation. Something our board can review." "You will have it." His voice softened. "I trust you. The board trusts paper. So do I." When the call ended, I opened Rachel's message to the client. She had not accused me of a crime. She was too careful for that. Instead, she raised questions. She suggested there were unresolved marital assets. She warned that future contracts might become entangled in litigation. Every sentence was written to create doubt without accepting responsibility for the damage. That afternoon, Eleanor came to the office. She placed Brandon's proposal beside Rachel's legal notice. They are using two different forms of pressure, she said. Rachel threatens uncertainty. Brandon offers relief. For a price. For a very specific price. I looked at the amount again. There was something familiar about it. Not the exact number. The shape of it. It was too precise to be an emotional demand. Someone had calculated what they needed. I asked my accountant to review public records connected to Brandon's businesses. He found several companies, most of them tied to luxury branding, vehicle brokerage, and private client consulting. One of those companies had recently guaranteed financing for a new showroom outside Nashville. The public filings showed a secured loan, a recent amendment, and a lien tied to the project. They did not reveal the private payment schedule or the exact balance. Still, the financing was large enough to explain Brandon's urgency. I compared the amount he demanded with the scale of the recorded debt. The figures sat uncomfortably close. I said nothing for several seconds. Eleanor saw the same pattern. This may not be about your vehicle, she said. Not completely. He may need money. And he thinks I am the easiest place to get it. My phone rang before I could say more. Rachel. I let it ring twice, then answered. Hello, Rachel. You received Brandon's message. I did. He is trying to keep this civilized. Is that what you call contacting my clients? Her tone hardened. I am protecting what belongs to me. You have not explained what that is. I helped build your life, Jack. We divided the life we built. You waited until after the divorce to show what you were really worth. The words landed more quietly than she intended. For years, Rachel had treated my work as proof that I lacked ambition. Now, she was rewriting that same history to claim I had hidden it. You called the project worthless, I said. I called it unfinished. You signed a statement refusing to fund it. That does not mean I gave up every right. I glanced at Eleanor. She shook her head once. Rachel continued. You can settle this privately. Pay what is fair, and I will stop contacting anyone. There it was. Not a misunderstanding. A condition. You are telling me the calls stop if I pay you. I am telling you this can become expensive. It already has. She paused. Then, her voice changed. Softer. Familiar. Jack, I do not want to destroy what you built. For one moment, I heard the woman who used to sit across from me at our kitchen table. Then, I heard the choice beneath the words. She wanted credit for restraint while holding the match. I will let the records speak, I said. The records will not repair your reputation after people start asking questions. That sounds like a warning. It is reality. The call ended. No goodbye? Eleanor waited until I placed the phone down. She just connected the payment to the client pressure. I heard it. Did you record the call? No. Then write down every word you remember. I did. Time. Date. Exact phrases. Every pause. Before sunset, a third message arrived. This one came from the board reviewing our largest expansion contract. They were postponing the final vote. Outside the conference room, the Cullinan sat motionless beneath the parking lot lights. Its dark blue paint reflected the office windows like still water. Rachel had seen that vehicle and decided it represented hidden wealth. Now, she was using that assumption to reach past the car, past the company, and into every relationship I had spent years earning. Eleanor closed her folder. We can challenge the demand now. Not yet. She studied me. What are you waiting for? I want to know why Brandon needs the exact amount he named. We already have a likely answer. Likely is not enough. My phone vibrated. An email had arrived from an address I did not recognize. The subject line contained only 3 words. You should know. Inside was what appeared to be part of Brandon's loan statement, along with a short message. The document claimed he had promised the lender that family money would cover an upcoming balance. It also listed a payment due within 72 hours. But, until Eleanor verified it, it was only a lead. The email pointed in the same direction as the numbers. Brandon appeared to be using Rachel's claim to solve his own financial crisis. Eleanor read the message twice, then looked at the loan statement. We need to verify this before we rely on it. I agree. The sender may have access to private records, or a reason to hurt him. Either way, we do not build our case on an anonymous message. That was how Eleanor worked. No excitement. No assumptions. Every useful fact had to survive contact with a document, a date, and another source. We spent the next morning reviewing public filings tied to Brandon's showroom project. The property lease had been signed 8 months earlier. A secured financing notice appeared 3 months after that. Brandon's consulting company was listed as a guarantor, and a later amendment showed that the lender had tightened its claim on the project assets. The public record did not show a private due date. The anonymous attachment did. Eleanor contacted the attorney listed on the financing notice and received no confidential details. The attorney would confirm only that the obligation remained active. That was not proof that Brandon's demand matched a debt payment. It was enough to explain why the timing deserved attention. Rachel had not seen my Cullinan and suddenly remembered a legal principle. She had seen a source of money. By noon, Eleanor had obtained the full petition Rachel planned to file. It went far beyond the vehicle. She wanted the business valued and its finances opened. Her argument was simple. She said my post-divorce income came from work that already belonged to the marriage. The Cullinan had only opened the door. Their real target was everything behind it. I sat in Eleanor's conference room, reading the request line by line. For 4 years, Rachel had treated my company as an afterthought. She never called to ask whether it survived. She never asked how many nights I worked in the garage or how many early contracts almost failed. Now, the business had value. Suddenly, she had a history with it. There is a particular kind of pain in watching someone claim the harvest after mocking the seed. I folded the document and placed it on the table. She does not believe this is hers. Eleanor did not answer immediately. What makes you certain? If she believed that, she would have filed first. She would not have sent Brandon to offer silence. That is a reasonable inference. She wants pressure, not clarity. And Brandon wants cash. The room went quiet. Then, Eleanor turned the unverified loan attachment toward me. There is another issue. What? Rachel may not understand how weak Brandon's position is. I looked at her. She signed the demand. Yes, but the settlement amount is almost identical to his debt. He may have framed this as money she is entitled to receive. Rachel had always been good at believing stories that supported the life she wanted. Brandon knew that. He also knew how much she valued appearances. A private showroom. A larger house. A man who seemed more ambitious than the husband she had left. If those promises were collapsing, he needed someone else to carry the cost. That afternoon, Eleanor found another public filing in Williamson County. A recently recorded deed of trust connected Brandon and Rachel to a large property outside Franklin. The filing did not reveal their private closing terms, but it showed another substantial obligation created within the same month as the showroom financing. Everything appeared to be tightening at once. The showroom, the property, the settlement demand, and the exact figure Rachel claimed I owed her. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. For one brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then, I remembered the hospital contract she had interrupted, the clients she had contacted, the careful way she had threatened my reputation while pretending to seek fairness. Whatever Brandon had told her, Rachel had chosen her methods. Eleanor closed the file. What do you want to do? Schedule formal mediation. She raised an eyebrow. You are not going to negotiate privately? No, that will force them to state their position on the record. That is the point. I wanted Rachel to explain exactly what she believed she owned. I wanted Brandon to sit beside her while she explained it. Most of all, I wanted them to commit to the story they had built before they learned how much the records could prove. Eleanor began drafting the request. Before she finished, my inbox chimed again. The message came from Brandon. He had shortened his private settlement deadline. 48 hours. He wrote that delays would only increase the damage to my company. Beneath that sentence was a second attachment. It contained a list of my current clients. Not estimates. Not public names. A complete internal list. I felt something inside me become very still. Brandon had not only studied my revenue. He had mapped every relationship he could threaten. I forwarded the file to Eleanor. Then, I looked at the tracking logs one more time. The downloaded presentation had been opened from Rachel's office. But the client list had never been inside that presentation. Someone had reached deeper into my company. And whoever did it was still inside. The client list meant our problem was no longer outside the company. Someone had given Brandon information he could not have found through public records, presentations, or casual questions. I called Eleanor first. Then, I called our technology contractor. By 7 that evening, he was reviewing login histories, file transfers, and remote access records. I stayed in the office while the building emptied around me. The overhead lights shut off automatically in the hallway. My own office remained bright. At 8:30, the contractor called. There was no external breach, he said. Then how did the list leave? An authorized account exported it. I looked through the glass toward the empty desks. Whose account? He hesitated. Your operations manager. His name was Colin Mercer. Colin had worked for me for nearly 3 years. He knew our customers, our schedules, and which contracts mattered most. He also knew where I kept the backup files. I did not call him that night. I asked the contractor to preserve everything. The next morning, Colin arrived at 7:45, carrying coffee and greeting the receptionist as usual. I waited until he settled at his desk. Then, I asked him to join me in the conference room. He closed the door behind him. What is going on? He asked. I placed the export record on the table. His face changed before he read the first line. That told me enough. Who did you send it to? He stared at the page. Jack, I can explain. Start with the name. He lowered his voice. Brandon Hayes. The room became very quiet. Colin told me Brandon had approached him months earlier through a professional networking group. He offered a consulting opportunity and asked harmless questions about fleet technology. Then, the questions became specific. Customer count, renewal dates, pricing. Colin said he refused at first. Brandon kept calling. Finally, he offered $5,000 for what he described as market research. Did Rachel know? I asked. I never spoke to her. That was not my question. Colin looked away. Brandon mentioned her. I felt the old pressure behind my ribs. He had not broken into the company. He had found the one person willing to open the door. You sent him the client list. Yes. You also sent financial information. Colin nodded. I wanted Anger to make the decision for me. It would have been easier. Instead, I asked for his office keys, disabled his access, and told him to leave the building. Eleanor advised me to document the admission and avoid discussing the matter with the staff until we understood the full damage. By 9, every employee knew something was wrong. By 10, Rachel created a larger problem. I was scheduled to speak at a community event in downtown Franklin. The gathering supported transportation services for older residents who could no longer drive. I considered canceling. Eleanor told me not to. You have done nothing wrong, she said. Do not disappear, because Rachel wants people to wonder why. The event was held inside a restored brick hall near the town square. Folding chairs filled the room. Local business owners, donors, and administrators sat beneath warm lights. I spoke about preventive maintenance, driver safety, and the cost of missed medical appointments. For 20 minutes, the room listened. Then, the moderator opened the floor. Rachel stood near the back. I had not seen her enter. She wore a pale suit and held herself with the calm confidence she used during property closings. I have a question, she said. The moderator recognized her. Rachel looked directly at me. Should community organizations invest in a company whose ownership is currently being challenged? No accusation. No raised voice. Just one carefully placed question. The room shifted. A few people looked at me. Others looked down at their programs. I could have answered with anger. I could have opened every file in public. Instead, I said, the company's ownership is documented. The claim will be addressed through the proper process. Rachel tilted her head. So the dispute is real. The claim is real. That does not make it valid. The moderator ended the exchange, but the damage had already begun. Afterward, 2 donors left without speaking to me. A board member asked whether future payments should be delayed. Another administrator requested written confirmation before continuing our pilot program. Outside, the Cullinan waited beneath the streetlights. A man near the entrance raised his phone and photographed it. By the time I reached home, the image was circulating online beside comments about hidden money, divorce assets, and a former county employee who had become wealthy too quickly. I placed my keys on the kitchen counter. For the first time since the demand arrived, the house felt too quiet. The next morning, our largest client suspended. Implementation pending review. An hour later, one of my senior employees entered my office. Her name was Denise Harper. She had been with me since our 2nd year. If contracts stay frozen, she said, you may need to cut payroll. We are not there yet. You are paying us from reserves. I did not answer. Her eyes softened. I can take unpaid leave. No. Jack, I am trying to help. You helped build this company. You will not carry the cost of someone else's pressure. After she left, I reviewed the accounts. I had already moved personal funds into payroll twice. We could continue for a while, but not forever. Rachel had not won the case. She had found a way to make waiting expensive. That evening, I returned to the workshop behind my house. Rain moved softly across the metal roof, the same sound I had heard during the first months of building the system. The gray steel cabinet stood against the far wall. Inside were the documents I had collected, but behind them sat another envelope. It had remained sealed since the divorce. I had forgotten why Eleanor, during the divorce, told me to keep it there. Then, I saw Rachel's signature through the thin paper and remembered exactly why it mattered. The envelope did not contain a secret fortune. It contained something more useful. A record of what Rachel had agreed was worthless. I carried it into the kitchen and opened it beneath the pendant light. Inside were copies of the final asset disclosure, correspondence between our attorneys, and a signed attachment from the divorce settlement. The paper had yellowed slightly along one edge. Rachel's signature had not changed. I read the attachment slowly. It stated that neither of us claimed ownership in an unfunded idea or future business built with separate money after our finances were divided. At the time, the language had seemed unnecessary. Rachel wanted it included because she feared I might use marital funds on what she called my garage experiment. Her attorney wanted proof that she would never become responsible for its expenses. Now, the same clause stood between her and the company she wanted to claim. I called Eleanor. She arrived before 8 the next morning. The rain had stopped, but water still ran from the workshop roof in slow drops. Eleanor placed the settlement attachment beside the notebook and compared the dates. "This is stronger than I remembered," she said. "Strong enough. Not alone." She pointed to Rachel's signature. "This proves she rejected any interest in an unfunded concept developed later with separate resources. We still need to establish that every valuable part came later." I opened the gray cabinet. We rebuilt the history one layer at a time. First came the bank statements, showing that our joint accounts had closed before I purchased anything for the project. Then, the software company provided the creation date for my first active account. The equipment supplier confirmed when I bought the testing units. Margaret Ellis sent a signed statement describing the first trial and the condition of the system when she received it. It was simple then, limited, unproven. Most important, it had been built after the divorce. We added the first customer payment, the business registration, the insurance policy, and every major design revision. Each date supported the next. By noon, the conference table had disappeared beneath dated exhibits. Eleanor stood at one end and studied the sequence. "This tells a complete story. Rachel will tell a different one. She can tell any story she wants. She cannot change these dates." We also preserved the records connected to Brandon. The tracked presentation, the access from Rachel's brokerage, the downloaded file, Colin's written admission, the client list Brandon later used to threaten the business. Eleanor warned me that the mediation should remain focused. "We are proving ownership," she said. "Do not turn this into a trial about Rachel's character." I understand. Brandon will try to provoke you. He has already tried. He will do it in the room because anger helps their story. I looked at the documents spread before us. For most of my marriage, Rachel had treated my calm as weakness. Brandon appeared to have made the same mistake. That was useful. Eleanor found one more document near the bottom of the envelope. It was a sworn statement Rachel had signed during the divorce. The statement confirmed that no shared funds had been used to create, test, or commercialize my maintenance idea. It went further. Rachel acknowledged that the project had produced no income, held no market value, and created no marital asset at the time of settlement. Eleanor read the paragraph again. Then, she placed it at the front of the evidence file. "This changes the order." "How?" "We do not begin by defending the company. We begin by asking Rachel whether this is her signature." The room felt different after that. Not lighter, clearer. For days, Rachel and Brandon had controlled the questions. They asked whether I had hidden money. They asked whether clients should trust me. They asked how much silence would cost. At mediation, they would have to answer. I spent the afternoon making duplicate sets of the full timeline. Each page received a label and a place in the timeline. No loose papers. No assumptions. No missing steps. Before leaving, Eleanor asked me one final question. "How much of Brandon's financial situation do you want introduced?" "Only what explains the pressure." You could damage both of them more. I know. Rachel had contacted my clients and stood in a public room to question my integrity. Part of me wanted every person in Franklin to understand exactly why. But humiliation was not ownership. Revenge was not proof. I wanted my company protected. I wanted the false claims corrected. I wanted the pressure to stop. Nothing beyond that would rebuild what had already been harmed. The mediation was scheduled for Friday morning. On Thursday night, I stayed late at the office and checked payroll one more time. We had enough cash to continue, but the paused contract still mattered. Denise knocked on my open door. Are we going to be all right? Yes. She studied me. You sound certain. I finally have the full record. She nodded, then looked through the window at the Cullinan. That car caused a lot of trouble. No, it only showed me where the trouble already was. The next morning, I placed the evidence box in the rear compartment. The dark blue paint reflected a pale Tennessee sky. For weeks, that vehicle had been used as proof of greed, secrecy, and hidden wealth. It was none of those things. It was a purchase made with documented earnings from work Rachel had rejected. At Eleanor's office, I parked near the entrance and turned off the engine. For a moment, I held the key in my palm. Then, I slipped it into my coat pocket and lifted the box. Inside the mediation room, Rachel was already seated. Brandon sat beside her. A lawyer I had never met arranged papers in front of them. Rachel looked at the box in my hands, then at Eleanor. Brandon smiled as if the outcome had already been priced. I took my seat across from them. Eleanor opened the first folder. On top was Rachel's sworn statement. For the first time since she appeared at my door, Rachel stopped looking confident. Rachel looked at the sworn statement as if the paper had appeared from nowhere. Her attorney reached for it first. Eleanor kept one hand on the folder. Before we begin, she said, we need Mrs. Carter to confirm several facts supporting her claim. Rachel straightened in her chair. I know what I am entitled to. That is what we are here to determine. Brandon leaned back beside her, calm and polished. His expression reminded me of the afternoon he entered my office pretending to be a customer. He still believed he understood the room. The mediator asked Rachel's attorney to present their position. He described my company as the delayed result of work begun during the marriage. He said I had preserved an undeclared business opportunity, waited until the divorce ended, then developed it in secret. Rachel watched me while he spoke. Brandon watched Eleanor's files. When the attorney finished, he named the settlement figure. The same figure Brandon had sent me. Eleanor wrote it down. Then, she addressed Rachel's attorney. Your mediation statement rests on 4 positions. I want to make certain the record is clear. He reviewed the filing in front of him. The idea existed during the marriage. Rachel claimed our marriage helped create it, that I hid its value, and that the vehicle was bought with money tied to it. Rachel folded her hands. That is exactly what happened. Eleanor looked toward the mediator. Then we can test those positions against the timeline. For weeks, Rachel had controlled the story through suggestions and carefully worded warnings. Now, her attorney had confirmed the foundation of the claim in the room. Eleanor opened the first folder. This is the final decree. She placed the document beside Rachel's statement. The financial separation date appears here. Do you dispute it? No, the next document followed. This is the closure record for the joint accounts. Then, another. This is the first software purchase connected to the operating system. It occurred 3 weeks after the decree. Rachel glanced toward her attorney. Eleanor continued. Here is the equipment invoice. Here is the account creation record. Here is the first functional test. Here is the first customer agreement. One document at a time. One date after another. The room grew quieter with every page. Rachel interrupted. He had the idea before the divorce. Yes, Eleanor said. He had notes describing maintenance problems. He knew it could become valuable. Mrs. Carter, you signed a statement declaring that it had no market value. Eleanor placed the sworn document in front of her. Rachel stared at her own signature. That was based on what Jack told me. I spoke for the first time. You wrote that it was a garage hobby. Her eyes moved toward me. You never explained what you were planning. There was nothing commercial to explain. Brandon shifted in his seat. This is about fairness, not technical dates. Eleanor turned to him. You are not a party to the divorce. I helped Rachel understand what Jack withheld. You also entered Mr. Carter's office as a potential client. Brandon's expression changed slightly. Eleanor placed the presentation access report on the table. This file was opened from your office and Mrs. Carter's brokerage. It was later downloaded. That proves nothing improper. No, this does. She added Colin's signed statement. Brandon stopped leaning back. Rachel looked at him. What is that? Her attorney read the first page, then whispered something to her. Brandon spoke quickly. An employee gave me market information. That has nothing to do with your ownership claim. It explains how you obtained internal revenue figures, Eleanor said. Rachel turned toward him. You told me those numbers were public. They were estimates. They matched the company records. Brandon's confidence broke. You told me Jack had hidden the business from the divorce, he said. You said the old notes were enough. Rachel stared at him. You built the demand. You chose the number. You were the one who said pressure would make him pay. Her attorney raised one hand. That is enough. But the room had already heard it. Brandon looked at the mediator. This is a distraction. Eleanor opened another folder. It is connected to the pressure placed on Mr. Carter's clients. Mr. Hayes used an internal customer list after demanding a confidential payment. Rachel's face lost color. He said it would only be used to support the claim, she said. Brandon turned toward her. And you gave me access through your office. Neither of them looked at me then. Her attorney asked for a private conference. The mediator allowed a short break. Rachel and her lawyer moved to the far end of the room. Brandon tried to follow. Her attorney stopped him. For the first time, Brandon stood alone. He walked toward the window and pulled out his phone. His movements were controlled, but his thumb moved quickly across the screen. Eleanor leaned toward me. He knows the claim is collapsing. I kept my voice low. He also believes his deadline is today. When the meeting resumed, Rachel returned without looking at Brandon. Her attorney changed their position. They no longer claimed the Cullinan itself was marital property. Instead, they argued that Rachel deserved compensation for supporting me during the years when the original idea formed. Eleanor did not argue about feelings. She opened the final chain of records. Retained earnings, tax filings, business account statements, the purchase authorization, the payment sent to the dealership. Every dollar leading to the Cullinan had been earned after the divorce. Nothing came from a shared account. Nothing came from concealed marital property. Nothing belonged to Rachel. Eleanor placed the vehicle key on the table beside the records. The car is not evidence of hidden wealth, she said. It is evidence of documented post-divorce income. No one spoke. Then, Brandon broke the silence. Rachel, we should leave. She turned toward him. You said Jack would settle. He still might. No, I said. Brandon looked at me. I kept my hand beside the key. I am not paying for silence. I am paying my employees. His jaw tightened. Rachel's attorney requested another recess. This time, Brandon left the room before anyone agreed. Through the glass wall, I saw him cross the hallway without waiting for Rachel. When she returned, the chair beside her remained empty. Her attorney closed the demand folder. Then, he asked whether Eleanor would discuss a complete withdrawal, a correction to the client notices, and protection from any future claim. Rachel no longer looked at the Cullinan key. She looked at the signature she had placed on the divorce statement 4 years earlier. The same signature that had turned her own story against her. Rachel withdrew the claim before noon. Her attorney read each condition aloud, slowly enough that nothing could be misunderstood. She surrendered any ownership demand against my company. She acknowledged that the Cullinan had been purchased with documented post-divorce income. She agreed to stop contacting my clients, employees, and community partners about the dispute. Most important, she signed written corrections for every organization she had warned. The corrections did not call her dishonest. They stated the facts. The ownership claim had been withdrawn. No court had found hidden marital assets. My company remained entirely mine. Rachel held the pen for several seconds before signing the last page. Then, she looked at me. Are you satisfied? The question carried more exhaustion than anger. This was never about satisfaction, I said. It was about stopping the damage. You could have settled privately. You could have asked privately. Her eyes dropped toward the table. For 26 years, I had known the small movements that revealed what Rachel refused to say. The tightening near her mouth. The way she straightened papers when she wanted control. The pause before she replaced regret with pride. That morning, the papers stayed crooked. Brandon never returned. Within weeks, his showroom project stalled, and the property he and Rachel planned to buy never closed. I had no role in either result. I contacted no lender, partner, or customer of his. He had built those problems himself. He had only decided that I should pay the bill. Rachel left Eleanor's office alone. Before she reached the door, she stopped beside my chair. Did you know the company would become this valuable? No, she studied my face. You expect me to believe that? I knew the problem was real. I knew the work mattered. That was enough to begin. She looked through the glass toward the parking lot. The Cullinan stood beneath the gray morning sky. I never thought you could build this life. There it was. The sentence beneath every argument we had ever had. She believed my value had appeared when the money did. It had not. The money only made something visible that she had stopped respecting years earlier. You never had to believe it, I said. Rachel waited, perhaps expecting more. I had nothing else to give her. She walked away. The damage took longer to repair than the mediation. Ownership could be confirmed in a morning. Trust returned more slowly. Eleanor prepared a verification packet for each client Rachel had contacted. It included the withdrawal, the financial timeline, and an independent statement confirming that no unresolved marital interest remained. Within 2 weeks, the hospital board reopened negotiations. The senior living network resumed implementation soon after. Not every relationship returned. One potential client chose another provider, and a community donor never called back. Winning did not erase that cost. It stopped the damage from spreading. I met with my employees on Monday morning. No speeches. No dramatic promises. I explained that the ownership issue was closed, the contracts were moving again, and payroll was secure. Denise released a breath and leaned back in her chair. Colin's desk remained empty. We tightened access controls after that. No single employee could export financial or client records without a second approval. I had trusted people because I wanted to build a business worth trusting. The lesson was not suspicion. It was stronger systems, so one person's weakness could not endanger everyone else's work. By autumn, the hospital contract was signed. The new revenue gave us room to expand without rushing. I used part of the profit to establish a support program for small transportation centers across rural Tennessee. Many served older residents who lived far from hospitals. Their vehicles were aging. Their budgets were thin. Their work still mattered. On the first delivery morning, I loaded several boxes of tracking equipment into the rear of the Cullinan. The polished interior looked almost too refined for cardboard boxes and tool cases. I smiled at that. Then, I closed the door. The road outside Franklin curved through low hills, white fences, and fields silvered by early light. I drove with one hand resting lightly on the wheel. For months, people had treated the vehicle as evidence. To Rachel, it proved I had hidden money. To Brandon, it represented cash he could reach. To strangers online, it became a reason to invent a story. But it was only a car. The records proved where it came from. My choices determined where it went. Several weeks later, Rachel sent one final message. She wrote that she wished I had shown her more of what I was capable of during our marriage. I read the sentence once. Then, I answered, "You saw the work. You just decided it was not worth seeing." She never replied. I placed the phone down and continued driving. The boxes shifted softly behind me as the road climbed toward the next town. Rachel had believed the Rolls-Royce proved I had hidden a fortune. The timeline proved something else. I built my life after she left it, one documented day at a time.